Hey everybody, what's happening? What's happening? Robert Kennedy III here, RK3. That's me in the house. I'm loving today because this my guest today, my friend Robin Jackson Brooks. We've been playing phone tag for how long?
Months.
Yeah, so we've been chasing each other a little bit, and I want to share with you. She's doing something amazing, or she did something amazing a few weeks ago, and she has some more of that coming up. And we're going to talk about that. But I want to start out just by sharing for those of you who have never joined one of the live broadcasts before. I'm Robert Kennedy III. I work with organizational leaders, helping them to deliver critical messages with confidence, and so there are a lot of reasons that that's important right now, especially in a world where there is a lot of remote work, there's a lot of telecommuting, there's a lot of not in the office, there's home office now, and so now most of your meetings are virtual. Most of your meetings are Zoom. Most of your meetings are WebEx. Most of your meetings are on video. I bet you didn't think we'd get here back in the day when you used to watch the Jetsons, right? And so most of those meetings are in a forum or in a medium that does not allow for that personal touch anymore. So how do you transmit the same energy? How do you influence? How do you inspire? How do you engage in that virtual setting? And so those are some of the things that I work with organizations on. As a matter of fact, coming up in the next couple of weeks, I've got a session entitled Win the Room, Powerful Presentations for Leaders. And that's going to go through some of the different techniques and methodologies for how you can influence in a virtual space. And then when we're out of here, you can take some of those same techniques and methodologies back to your in-person settings and continue to win the room. So just wanted to share that with you. I'll share with you a little bit later on how to sign up for that and how to get connected with that. But right now, I want to chat a little bit with Robin. And Robin is the CEO of Mindsteps Inc. And I don't want to get what Mindsteps does wrong. So I'm going to ask her to explain a little bit about what that is. Robin, tell us, actually, before we jump into that, hey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm excited to be here. This has been
Yeah.
a long time coming.
Yes, it has. And I'm so glad that we were able to make it happen. And the reason, part of the reason why this has happened, I've been like following your business for, gosh, it's got to be about 4 or 5 years. And just kind of seeing some of the things that you've done. And it's funny, I kind of happened upon your business at some point, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's doing great things. And at that point, I didn't really realize that we had so many friends in common
Mhm.
and that we kind of were in the same area, the same circles, if you will. So it's just amazing that we're able to end up here right now. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your company. Tell us little bit about Mindsteps.
So Mindsteps is an educational consulting firm, and what we do is we work with principals, assistant principals, district leaders, with the idea of helping them turn their schools into success stories. And
Yeah.
here's the most important part: with the people and resources that they already have. So instead of having to go out and buy a new program, or instead of having to fire people, how do you take an organization as is and turn that organization into a success story using the resources that you already have? You don't have to wait. You can do it right now.
Wow. So you know that I love the word stories
Yeah.
already, and we're gonna dive into that in just a little bit. But how is this new normal or this new world affecting what you do with schools? Everybody's going virtual now.
Yeah. So when the quarantine started happening around March, the
Hmm.
business as we know it, or as we knew it, disappeared.
Right.
So basically, what we were doing before COVID was that we were traveling to districts. I was
Hmm.
spending days in schools or in districts training people or coaching people.
Right.
But once the quarantine hit, all travel stopped, schools closed down, so all business went away. So we had to completely reinvent ourselves in March. And we do 4 live events a year. And all of a sudden, all of those live events were canceled because we couldn't bring people together. So we had to transition our live events to virtual events, and we had to do it in a way that would still capture the magic that happens during those live events. We call them they're not conferences, they're intensives because
Yeah.
people come in and it's really interactive and we really get a lot of work done. So how do we provide that same experience with people working virtually? And then I had to think about, what was the business going to look like? Is this something temporary, or do we use this as an opportunity to rethink how we've always done business and to make it something that's even better?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you just did this intensive, this virtual intensive. You took the thing that you were doing in the schools or in the classrooms, and you literally built out a studio and launched this thing in, I'm going to say your garage, because there's a lot of garages that are now moving from places where cars are supposed to be, and there's
Yeah.
entire cameras and lights and total entire studios in there. So tell us a little bit about how you got that moving. How did you get your Builders Lab 360 session moving?
So first thing we did was we had to think about what made Builders Lab Live so special. What were
Yeah.
the elements that we didn't want to lose? And then we start thinking about how can we turn this virtual event into a 360-degree event where
Wow.
people are fully immersed in what's happening
Yeah.
and where we could bring the special elements. So there are things that we weren't sure we could replicate. So at our live event, one of the big things that we're known for is we feed people really, really well. I love to eat. And then every afternoon we have popcorn breaks and, there's just food all over the place. We spoil people.
Yeah.
So we started asking ourselves, how could we spoil people? And so what we decided to do was we created what we call the Builder's Box. And so when people bought a ticket to our virtual event, we mailed them in the mail a physical box so that they could have something they could taste and touch and feel. And inside of that physical box, we had a break box with some of the food and food items that we're kind of known for at our live event. We put that in the break box. So during breaks, they could go into that break box and open up something and get, we had popcorn breaks in the afternoon, and we went and got Garrett's popcorn, and we went and got, some other great popcorn so they could have a flight. And then we made sure that we had things for the morning break so that that way people could still get that experience, and people love the break box. But also inside of that Builder's Box, we had different envelopes. So one of the other things we do at our live event is every single day, there's a new surprise waiting for people in the room, or they get something during the day. So how do we recreate that element? So every day for Builders Lab 360, they would open up a new envelope. So all the envelopes said, do not open until instructed. And then when it was time, they'd open up an envelope and there'd be another treat or another surprise. So it just was this kind of wave of treats and supplies and surprises that were happening throughout. We wanted to, Builders Lab is very interactive, and a lot of the web broadcasting programs that are out there, they're one way. So I can stand up and I can talk to people, but they can't talk back to me.
Right.
And that was really important to us. So we set up monitors. So I was, talking in front of just kind of a sea of monitors so that I could see every single participant's picture and face on the monitor. And then we had whiteboards that people could hold up. So if I was asking a general question, they could write their answer on a whiteboard and hold it up to the screen so I could get a read of the room. We could unmute them at any time. So if they had a question, we had a little hand sign. I don't see any here, but a little hand sign that they could raise. And I would say, okay, Sarah, go ahead and unmute yourself with your question. So then we could bring her up on the screen. I was talking in front of a big screen that we used a rear projector on, so I could stand in front of the screen and we could bring people up on the screen. So so my team is handing me these things now. So this is a thumbs up. I never figured that. I think it goes this way, but then this is like the little hand sign, and this is the whiteboard that they could, hold up on their screen with their answers. So we did everything we could to make sure that it was interactive, and the feedback that we got from the participants in the event was just incredible. I mean, people are still talking about it, how immersive it was, how how they just didn't get bored. We went from 10 to 6:30 every single day. So it was a full day event, and we had, videos, and I was doing teaching. It could, a Zoom meeting that long would just be excruciating. So we tried to figure out, how do we still recapture the intensity and the fun and the enlightenment that happens during the main event, but do it virtually. and it took us months. We had to
Yeah.
build out a studio. We went to a lot of virtual events and critiqued them. We, tried out a lot of things and experimented until we found the right mix.
Mhm.
And I think we've succeeded. There's still some things we want to do even better for the next event, but
Right.
we have, the feedback has just been incredible.
So that sounds like you slept for like a week after that was done, because I mean, I'm listening to this and I'm like, wow, this was not just like you said, one of those regular Zoom events where you kind of sit there and you stare at a screen for hours. You literally had objects that you sent to people in advance so that there was an immersive or interactive element to this thing the entire way through, and you built that out. It wasn't just some random object. These were specific to your company. So if you had to recommend to a company that does meetings or is interested in doing virtual experiences, what's the biggest takeaway that you had from your event that you would share with them?
So I think the biggest takeaway for us was that we couldn't get caught up in bells and whistles.
Hmm.
So there are a ton of tools out there. We looked at some of them. We had demos scheduled with salespeople for some of the events.
Right.
But if you don't understand what makes your event special live, then you can't replicate it in a virtual environment, or you can't provide people the same experience. So I think it's get to the heart of what that experience is for people, and then look for the tools to help you provide that same experience online, rather than trying to find the tool and then conforming to what the tool can do. Make the
Right.
tools work for you.
Right, right. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier on is stories, or changing the stories of the school. And you and I both talk about storytelling in two different areas. You're in the educational space, and I'm in the corporate space more so. But as you're building out an event like this, how do you think from a story perspective? How do you incorporate storytelling in what you're doing?
So I love Donald Miller's work. He has a book called Building a Story Brand, and he
Yeah.
breaks down the elements of a story. And so you have to have a hero. And by the way, you're not the hero. So when we
Yeah.
were selling this event, we were making sure that the people who are our ideal participants were the heroes of our advertising story, the story that we were telling online.
Right.
And we also told the story about how we were having to pivot. And because we're in education, we also told the story about how we have to do the things that we're asking teachers to do. So
Right.
the same way that we're asking teachers to take the classroom experience and bring it online and still make it interactive and engaging for students, we have to walk that talk, and we have to
Right.
model that first. So every time we were doing a tweak, we were sharing the story of what tweak we were making and why we were making that tweak and how it could apply to a school setting. So
Yeah.
the people were on the journey with us. We were pivoting as a company, and we brought people along. We were pretty transparent about what we were doing and how we were changing. And if we
Right.
hit a roadblock, we were doing all these tech run throughs, and the tech, just was failing us. And we were having to go back and figure out another way. But we were sharing those stories along the way. But always from a perspective not of us as the hero, but positioning ourselves as the guide. They were the heroes. And the reason that we were going through all of this was so that we could figure it out and share it with them, because they were also struggling with this. Plus, they were also trying to figure out how to feed all their students and how to manage all their teachers' anxiety and how to manage their own anxiety. So we positioned ourselves as the guide to say, listen, we are going to do this work. We're going to figure this out, and then we're going to provide you with an amazing experience that shows you the framework so that you can figure it out in your own school. And I think that story is what helped make our event participants so accommodating with all of the tech fails, right?
Yeah.
So if we had told a different story, which is we had this amazing event, and our event is not cheap. The investment for our event is $997 per
Right.
person. And it's the same investment as the live event, because we felt like you were getting the same quality and the same value.
Hmm.
So we could have said this is a boutique event and that sort of thing. And the moment that things broke, people would have been demanding their money back, because I paid all this money. Why aren't things working perfectly? But by taking people along with us on the story,
Hmm.
people were invested in our success. And when we had, the night before the event, we had a registration and we had a mocktail party, and
Yeah.
we set people mocktails in the box, and we had everything set up, and the tech crashed during the mocktail party. And so
Yeah.
people could not get into the mocktail party. They were all ready. They had their bottles because we'd sent them emails ahead of time. Put this package in the refrigerator. Make sure you take it out at this time.
Right.
And then everything crashed. And that could have devastated the event and given everybody just a stinky attitude coming into the event. The first thing that you do crashes.
Hmm.
But because we had included people in the story, because they were the heroes, they were so generous. And people got into our Facebook group and they were like, well, I'm drinking my mocktail and I can't get in, but what's everybody else doing? So they had their own mocktail party inside the Facebook group.
Yeah.
And then when we finally figured out how to get them back in, they, after waiting an hour and a half, came into the mocktail party late and still were participating and showed up the next day excited about what they were going to learn. That could have never happened if we hadn't been making them a part of our story all along.
Nice, nice. So tell us a little bit. You are in the midst of tech challenges here. Um, as we as we do virtual experiences even more, tech challenges are absolutely going to be a part of the landscape. So, in your story building or in your planning process, what were some of the things that you had to consider in case tech fails happen? What were some of the things that you put in place?
So we had three things. First of all, we had to adopt new technology with which we were not familiar. So
Right.
there's a lot of user error because my team and I are having to learn new tech on the fly.
Wow.
Secondly, we needed a lot more bandwidth. We had to upgrade the internet. We had to figure out how to hardwire some things. We had to, we ordered a lot of things and then had to figure out how capture cards work and how those fit with the camera. We went to YouTube University and watched
Yeah.
a lot of videos to try to figure this out. So there was just a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get frustrated by the learning curve and they give up before they get to the other side.
Right.
If you're going to do this, you are going to have to learn an entirely new way to deliver. And that means you're going to have to learn the technology.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to hire somebody to come set it up and then pay that person to stand by so that when things fail, they can fix it. Either one, you can have it fast, cheap, and good, but you can't have all three. So we wanted it fast and cheap. Well, we wanted it fast and good, but
Yeah.
it wasn't cheap, in terms of having to buy the stuff. And it wasn't cheap in terms of our time, spending a lot of time learning how to do it. And we're still not great at it, but we learned enough to be able to pull it off and to understand how to pull it off. And the problem is the more you learn, the more there is to learn. So
Right.
we're still learning. So that's a big challenge. The second thing is that even if you get everything perfect during the run through, when you actually load people in, stuff breaks. And so you just have to be really resilient about that. I mean, a couple of things broke during the conference, but again, we were, our conference mascot was, I wish I could show it to you. It's so weird. There was a sweet potato that was sitting in my vegetable bin that sprouted.
Wow. Okay.
And so I bought it. I had it in my hand one day and I came to the office. I meant to go to my garden and plant it, but I didn't plant it. Here, my team is handing it to me. So here's the sweet potato, right? It's still sprouting. So we put it, I set it down in the office and just left it. And that joker has grown into like a full-fledged plant. It has no soil, no water, and no sunlight.
Wow.
And yet it's turned into this plant. And so I would tell people, the story, the sweet potato became our official mascot for the event. And I was telling people, we all have to be like the sweet potato. We got to bloom where we're planted. And we can't worry about the fact that there's no soil, there's no light, no water. We still have to bloom because that's what our students need. And again, positioning them as the hero and modeling for them what it looks like to bloom where you're planted made people, just kind of root for us when the tech challenges came. Again, they could have said, we spent all this money and you're still having these issues,
Right.
but they didn't say that at all. The tech challenges, watching us work through them, including them in that process, helped them be invested in our success and help them be very patient when we experience the tech challenges.
Yeah.
We got so much feedback after the event about how they love the way we modeled rolling with the punches, how they want to be a sweet potato, so they started telling us that. So that story became another of the reigning narratives of the event. And, creating those metaphors for people where they can see themselves in those metaphors are hugely important for your brand, for your business, because if people can see themselves as a part of your business,
Hmm.
that's when you have these raving super fans that aren't just treating you like a transactional kind of relationship. They are invested in your success. They
Right.
feel because they feel like they are a part of your success.
Yeah. So you talked about Donald Miller, and you've mentioned the hero's journey
Mhm.
part a few times here. What are some of the other elements? I mean, you're talking about making the audience the hero, making the customer, the attendees, the hero. But what are some of the other elements in storytelling that helps you to build out this entire journey for them?
I think the most important element in that hero's journey is
Hmm.
understanding the hero's three problems.
Hmm.
So the hero always has an external problem, an internal problem, and a philosophical problem. And the better you are as a company at articulating those three problems,
Hmm.
using the language that your ideal customer uses, the better you are at that, the more people will see you as the solution.
Yeah.
So you got to really listen to your customers and your clients. You've got to really understand their problems. And then you don't just sell them nonsense. You have to position what you are selling as a solution to that, which
Right.
means you have to actually understand their problems and build something that is a viable solution. I think
Right.
the thing that has helped us kind of survive is that we have spent years listening to our customers. And
Right.
so when the pandemic hit, the challenges that they were experiencing as their external challenges were just a different version of the internal challenges that they've been experiencing all along.
Right.
Once we understood that, we didn't rush to try to solve the external challenge of teaching in a quarantine. We stayed focused on solving the internal challenge and the philosophical challenges that they were facing. And we showed them how this pandemic was just a symptom of something bigger. And
Right.
because we did that, our brand stayed very strong, and people who had, former clients were coming back and saying, you know what you taught me during times of plenty has served me during the lean times. And so
Right.
we got incredible testimonials because we did not change that story.
Yeah.
We kept the same story, and we showed them how the story that we were building with them still applied, and that gave people a lot of calm and peace, because there were a lot of people thinking, oh goodness, we're going to have to reinvent everything. And what we were trying to tell them, we root in principles, not strategies.
Right.
And because of that story that had become so strong, people turned to us for certainty in these uncertain times, because they knew that we weren't going to change. I saw other companies in our space who, like one company has a list of standards for teachers, and then
Right.
they sent out an email. It made me so mad because they said, hey, hold on, we're developing a new list of standards for teachers for teaching in a pandemic.
Wow.
And I thought, if your standards are not crisis proof, if they have to change every time there's a new crisis, I
Right.
can't depend on that.
Right.
If you're building a story with clients, that story should not change during crisis.
Wow.
You should
Wow.
build a story that's crisis proof, because then your clients will come back to you time and time again, because they know they can anchor in the story that you built, that your
Yeah.
story is not subject to the whims of, these changing times.
Right. So you talked about external, internal, and philosophical problems. Can you dig into that just a little bit? Maybe give us an example of what those are, because I know that internal and philosophical might be a little bit confusing for some people.
Yeah. So Donald Miller breaks it out pretty well. He says that there's an external problem, which is the thing that people think is getting in the way of what they really want,
Right.
right? So you have to understand your hero. You have to understand what your hero wants. Your hero doesn't want a product, a service, or a program. Your hero wants what the product or service or program will deliver them. So I had a mentor once say, don't sell grass seeds, sell greener lawns, because that's what your hero really wants, right?
Right.
So once you understand what your hero wants, the external problem is what your hero perceives to be in between them and what they want, keeping them from getting what they want.
Right.
So in my case, with principals, a lot of times their external problem is resistant teachers or lack of resources, or in this case, having to go to quarantine and teach remotely, and
Right.
having to do that without, with like a week's notice,
Right.
right? So all of those are external problems, but they all lead to the bigger internal problem, which is, I have a vision for my school and I don't know how to achieve that vision for my school, right?
Mm.
So the internal problem is really about this constant battle that school administrators have, because they know that their school could be better whatever better means to them.
Right.
But they're always running up against these obstacles that are keeping them from achieving the school that they really want, turning their school into a success story. And then the philosophical problem, so the internal problem is how that makes me feel, how the external problem makes me feel. So
Right.
for me, my administrators are frustrated because they know what their school can become, but they're meeting so many obstacles that are keeping them from achieving the vision that they have for their school. So they're very, very frustrated. And then the philosophical problem is why that's wrong, right?
Right.
And so for my administrators, the philosophical problem is children deserve an A+ education. Every child deserves an A+ education. So that becomes their philosophical problem. If you can articulate that, understand it, if you can build something that shows them the pathway out of their external, internal, and philosophical problem to achieving their goals, then they're not just clients. They become a part of your organization. They become the people who tell other people about you. They become your success stories.
Wow.
And that's kind of our vision for our company is we want to turn as many schools into success stories as we possibly can. That's what I look for. When I'm working with a school, I don't want to stop until that school is another success story that the principal can tell and that I can tell about. We used to be here and now we're here.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of drives me too.
Yeah, yeah. We could go on forever. As a former educator myself, I'm digging some of this, and I'm ready to kind of dive deeper on some of this. But we only have so much time. So let's kind of wrap with this. As you do what you do, you've given us essentially a master class in virtual experiences and storytelling and how to incorporate or combine the two. As people look to excel or navigate this virtual space, what is the one big thing or one piece of advice that you would leave with them?
I think it's a repetition of the advice that I gave earlier. You have to really understand the story journey that you're taking your clients on. And
Yeah.
I always tell my clients this: whoever controls your narrative controls your culture.
Right.
Right. So if you let technology drive your narrative, then it will control your culture. If you let your clients drive your narrative, it controls your culture. You have to stay in control of your narrative no matter what happens.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't, look at this pandemic. And I see a lot of people like burning down the business that they had before and trying to resurrect a new business.
Yeah.
If you have a solid company story, if your business is already telling a solid story, then the pandemic just becomes the next chapter in that story. You don't change your story because of your circumstances. You figure out what this chapter is going to look like and how do you write this chapter so that it's a continuation of your story. That's what creates a strong brand. And frankly, that's what creates a business that you never want to leave. That if you build a business that tells the story that you want to tell, if you stay in control of your narrative, no matter what, then you build a business that you love rather than a business that drives you. So for me, the big advice is stay in control of your narrative. And that helps you pivot, and it helps you stop wasting time chasing squirrels and really stay focused on what narrative you're trying to tell, because whomever controls your narrative controls your business, your culture, everything.
Nice. So wow, there's just so much inside of this. You've told us about marketing and branding, storytelling, virtual experiences. As we mentioned, you've also shared with us some technology issues and fixes and how to navigate when the technology crashes and how to plan for that. Where can people find out a little bit more about Robin and Mindsteps?
So there are two places. One is you can go to our website at mindstepsinc.com. And the other is I have a podcast called School Leadership Reimagined. And so that is a podcast that really thinks about, we want to help people move from being leaders to being builders. So rather than just kind of going out and trying to drag people to your goal, go out and start building the thing that you want to build and invite people. So we always say, bosses say go, leaders say, let's go,
Let's
but
go.
builders say, come. And so, how do you make the transition from trying to get people to kind of move forward to creating something that people can't resist and then inviting people to join you in that work? So, whether, the focus for us is on school leaders, but I've heard from a lot of my business colleagues that they also listen to the show because there's so many, we talk so much about this idea of buildership, which goes beyond schools to
Yeah.
any kind of organization that you are trying to build, making that shift from being a leader to being a builder, to building a story that other people are so compelled by that they want to be a part of that story is so super important. And so that podcast, again, is called School Leadership Reimagined. And you can get past episodes either on iTunes or Spotify, but you can also get them on schoolleadershipreimagined.com.
That's awesome. Robin, I appreciate your time and just kind of hanging out with me today. We've covered so much ground, and I really appreciate your expertise and everything that you're doing. So, for those of you that want to learn about Robin a little bit more, as she mentioned, go to her website, mindstepsinc.com, and go check out that podcast. Speaking of communication, speaking of podcasts, speaking of storytelling, I want to remind you to get connected with the Win the Room Powerful Presentations for Leaders. I'm going to be putting the link in the comments underneath this video. It's kineticcommunications.com with a K / Win the Room for Leaders. Kineticcommunications.com / Win the Room for Leaders. I'll be posting that in the comments underneath this. We're going to be hosting our next session on August 19th. I believe it's at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you are an organizational leader, if you are a communicator, if you are a presenter, if you're somebody who needs to get their ideas across in meetings or in large groups, make sure that you check out that session, because we're going to share with you how you can not only communicate confidently and effectively, but how you can use your story, how you can use your organizational story to make a difference, to impact, influence, and inspire. Listen, y'all, today has been awesome. Robin, woohoo! Thank you for hanging out with me. And I'll see you all next time. I'll probably do this again next Wednesday. See you soon.